Rain came slow that night, drifting through Redstone Valley like a tired song. The wind had the voice of something ancient, brushing over the dry sagebrush and whispering against the shuttered windows of a lone wooden cabin. Inside, the faint crackle of an oil lamp threw gentle gold on rough-hewn walls. Caleb Thorne, age 30, sat alone at his small wooden table, mending a saddle strap with steady hands that bore the memory of too many long rides and too few kind words. He had grown used to silence, the kind that fills the lungs until a man begins to hear his own heart as company. Outside, thunder rolled softly, echoing against the far hills. He was about to bank the fire when it came, a knock. Soft, almost embarrassed, the sort of sound that expected to be turned away. Caleb frowned. Few souls came this far past dusk. He opened the door. Standing in the rain was a woman wrapped in a thin shawl soaked clear through. Her black hair clung to her face, streaked with silver like moonlight caught in river water. Her eyes held the color of storm clouds over canyon stone, sad, proud, and searching. She was Alara Greyfeather, age 45, a widow and silversmith known to sell beaded jewelry in town. The people whispered things about her, that she was too beautiful for her years, too strange to be trusted. Caleb had heard the talk, but what he saw was a woman whose strength had been carved by hardship, not rumor. "Can I stay one night in your cabin?" she asked. Her voice trembled between dignity and exhaustion. Caleb looked at her for a long moment, the lamp flickering between them. "You can," he said finally, stepping aside. She entered quietly, her wet shawl dripping on the floorboards. The air filled with the faint scent of sage and river clay. Caleb placed another log on the fire, the crackling warmth drawing her closer. For a while neither spoke. There was only the hush of rain on the roof and the shy flicker of light across her face. When she thanked him, she tried to offer one of her necklaces, turquoise stones woven in silver wire. "For your kindness," she said softly. He shook his head. "No price for that." Their eyes met, hers wary, his steady, and in that stillness, something fragile passed between them. A kind of understanding born of two people who had been left behind by the same world. Outside, the storm pressed against the cabin walls like a restless ghost. Alara held her shawl close. "Folks don't forget easily in this town," she murmured. "They see a woman alone, they make their stories." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Let them talk. The world's full of empty mouths." A faint smile touched her lips, uncertain but grateful. She looked toward the flames as if they might remember something for her. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'll leave by dawn." He nodded, though part of him already wished she wouldn't. The firelight shimmered between them, and the silence grew warm, almost tender. Somewhere outside, the wind shifted direction, carrying the promise of another day neither of them expected to share. By morning, the storm had passed. Gold light poured across the valley like a benediction. Caleb brewed coffee while Alara folded her shawl, her movements quiet, careful, as if she didn't want to disturb what peace still lingered in the air. When she stepped toward the door, he noticed the leather strap of her satchel had split. Without asking, he took it gently from her hands and repaired it with the same patience he'd given the saddle the night before. She watched him in silence. When he handed it back, their fingers brushed, barely a touch, and both drew a breath as if surprised by something neither had planned to feel. "Thank you," she said. "Safe travels," he replied. Outside, the valley stretched endless and pale beneath the rising sun. Alara hesitated at the threshold, eyes tracing the outline of the cabin, the soft smoke curling upward like a memory already forming. For a moment she seemed to want to say something more, but instead she stepped into the light and walked away. Caleb watched her go until the figure became part of the horizon. Only then did he realize the cabin felt too quiet again. By midday, the whispers began. Mrs. Abernathy saw her leaving his place and told the storekeeper before noon. Sheriff Cole heard it by supper. By evening, half the town knew that Alara Greyfeather had spent the night under Caleb Thorne's roof. In a town like Redstone, stories spread faster than fire on dry grass. Ilara returned the next day to the trading post with her small box of jewelry. She kept her chin high as the stairs followed her. Some women turned their backs, others smirked behind gloved hands. She could feel the words hanging in the air like dust: sinful, desperate, shameless. Still, she laid out her necklaces one by one, silver and turquoise catching the sun. Caleb came into town that afternoon for supplies. When he saw her at the stall, the shame in her eyes cut through him. He tipped his hat to her, ignoring the murmurs. "Afternoon, Miss Greyfeather," he said loud enough for every watching ear. A pause settled over the square. She looked at him, startled. Then something softened in her face, a small light flickering back to life. That evening she came again to his cabin, not to ask, but to return the kindness. She brought bread, fresh and warm, and the softest smile he'd seen in years. They ate together, speaking little. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore, it was full of things words couldn't hold. When she rose to leave, he stopped her with only a few words. "You don't have to be alone out there." Her breath caught. "I've been alone a long time, Caleb." He nodded. "So have I." The night air carried their unspoken promises. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring, only that something had shifted, the kind of change that moves quiet but never fades. The next days passed in rhythm. She would bring him trinkets to mend or stories from her people. He would share food, tools, laughter that came easier than it used to. But the town saw them, always watching, always judging. Whispers sharpened into warnings. One afternoon, the sheriff rode up to Caleb's place. "You keepin' company with that woman, Thorne?" Caleb's gaze stayed level. "Ain't your business who I share supper with." The sheriff spat in the dust. "People talk." "Let 'em," Caleb said, voice steady. "They'll get tired before I do." The next Sunday, Caleb and Ilara stood beneath 2 cottonwood trees by the river. The Reverend, reluctant but bound by his cloth, performed the ceremony. The sun glowed through the branches, turning the air to gold. Ilara wore a white shawl trimmed with turquoise beads, her dark hair braided with silver threads. Caleb stood beside her, simple and sure, his eyes soft as he spoke his vow. "I've ridden through dust and war, and I never found peace till you knocked on my door." Her hand trembled as she slipped the ring she had made, silver twisted into a perfect loop, onto his finger. The wind sighed through the leaves, and for a moment the world grew still. Even the river seemed to listen. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Ilara closed her eyes. She felt the weight of years fall away, replaced by something fragile and sacred. Caleb touched her cheek, rough hand against soft skin, and the touch said everything words could not. They rode back to the cabin as husband and wife. The townsfolk watched from their porches, whispers chasing their horses' hooves. But neither looked back. Days turned into weeks, and the gossip did not fade. Some refused to trade with Caleb. Others muttered when Ilara passed by. But the two of them built a life from stubbornness and grace. He fenced the land anew. She turned the shed into a workshop, crafting jewelry that caught the light like bottled sunlight. At night, they sat by the fire in silence, their hands intertwined. Sometimes he would read aloud from an old Bible, his voice slow and calm, and she would listen with her head on his shoulder. Outside, the coyotes sang in the distance, and it no longer sounded lonely. Then came the fire. It started in the eastern pasture, a spark from a lantern knocked over by wind. By the time Caleb reached the barn, the flames were already roaring. Without a word, Ilara ran beside him. Her shawl caught cinders, but she didn't stop. Inside, the horses screamed, the air thick with heat. She found a small colt trapped near the stall and freed it, her arms burning as she pushed it toward the door. Caleb dragged her out moments before the roof gave way. When dawn came, half the valley was watching. The barn was gone, but the horses lived. The townsfolk, once cold and cruel, saw the burns on Ilara's hands, the ash in her hair, the courage in her eyes. Something in their judgment faltered. Days later, Mrs. Abernathy came by the cabin with fresh bread. She didn't speak of apologies, but she left it on the porch. One by one, others began to follow, tools, seeds, simple gestures that meant more than words. Time, at last, became gentle again. Years passed quietly. The cabin aged with them. Ilara's hair turned white. Caleb's hands grew slower, but his smile stayed young. On summer evenings, children from nearby farms would play in their fields, chasing fireflies until dusk. The world had changed, maybe not much, but enough. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, Caleb looked up from the porch and found Ilara at the window, threading turquoise beads with her old, steady hands. He walked to her side, touching her arm. "You remember that night you knocked on my door?" he asked. She smiled, her eyes soft with memory. "I never really left," she whispered. The firelight flickered, warm and alive. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods like a hymn. Caleb pressed her hand to his heart, feeling it beat slow and sure beneath her touch. The old soul who tells this story, some say it was a traveler, others say it was the wind itself, would end the tale here, where light still lingers and the world grows kind again. Because in that lonely stretch of Redstone Valley, where judgment once lived and love now endures, there remains a cabin where the lamp never goes out. And sometimes, if the night is quiet enough, you can still hear the faint echo of a knock, soft, uncertain, but full of hope.